Ladies and gentlemen, this is David Mercatani with another episode of Matt Chat. We are brought to you by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and sponsored by Nike Wrestling. Go to athleteps.com for all of your Nike and USA Wrestling branded gear. Today, I am joined by my good friend, the vice president of the Missouri Border Brawl, the head coach at Greater Heights Wrestling Club, the 17 or 18-time Kids State champions in Missouri, and most importantly for today's conversation, a licensed attorney who we're going to discuss about NIL, Jason Keck. Jason, long time coming. Glad to finally have you on the show, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, David. Exciting times around the NCAA, and not very often does the Supreme Court take on a sports-related case. So we are in unique times, to say the least.
Yeah, full disclosure, Keck and I talk a lot. We hung out at nationals. We hung out at Olympic trials. We usually hang out at junior duels. We're taking my dad out to dinner at Fargo. So this could digress into two buddies talking very quickly, but I'm going to try to keep it as professional as I can. I'm super fascinated with NIL. Okay. And for those people that don't know, it's name, image, likeness, broad strokes. And then I'm going to let you be the expert on this, but broad strokes are athletes, not just college athletes, but high school athletes, middle school, anybody basically can now make money off their name, image, and likeness, and can no longer be prevented from doing so by the NCAA or any appearance of amateurism. So what I'd like you to talk about first, we did some prep on this. I'd like you to talk about the Supreme Court ruling first, if you don't mind doing that.
Sure. So the Supreme Court case of Alston versus NCAA is kind of a seminal case in the rights of college athletes. So the case was decided by the Supreme Court. It was a unanimous 9-0 decision, which I don't recall very many decisions being unanimous in cases that I've read through law school or at my times doing research where all 9 justices have fell on the same side of the coin, so to speak. So basically what the Supreme Court decided is they upheld a lower court's decision that NCAA restrictions on, and this is the key term, educational related benefits for college athletes violated antitrust laws. And so
time out real quick. What is antitrust law for those of us that don't know?
So antitrust laws in general terms would be when there's a monopoly in an industry and they do price fixing or things of that nature to keep the status quo. So in this case, basically what the Supreme Court has found is that the NCAA is a monopoly. They're making millions and billions of dollars, and we see administrators making salaries in the millions. We see college coaches, especially in basketball and football, making $1 million plus salaries. But yet the college athletes who are the product don't receive any compensation for playing their sport.
So just to interject as the non-lawyer, okay, as the financial advisor wrestling guy. So the argument that the NCAA has made and the institutions have made is you do get compensation. You get a scholarship, which is you get tuition, you get books, you get room, you get board. And there's also a cost of living allowance. So that is their argument on the other side of it. Let me just say at this point, any of the opinions that we express here for the next 40 minutes are those of Jason and mine and not of USA Wrestling. I'm supposed to say that at the beginning, like I got going. So I'm going to make sure I say that because I'm probably going to have to say that several episodes of what we're talking about here. And I don't even know if we'll get through everything today. If you have time, I might have you on next week. But so that's their argument. The monopoly one, I think, is a fairly obvious one, right? Like, if you wanted, like, basically the NCAA is the minor leagues for the NFL and for the NBA. I mean, that's Major League Baseball has like a minor league system and kids get paid and they get to sign big bonuses out of high school and things like that. So go on. I just kind of wanted to interject with that. I apologize. Go ahead.
No, so this was kind of the first step for athletes. The lawyers that decided to appeal the case to the Supreme Court kind of carved out a little niche, which is the starting point to say that the NCAA can no longer make restrictions on education-related benefits. And so that can include scholarships, that can include school supplies. And so I think you're going to see a lot of litigation to come. And this is kind of the opening the door, so to speak, of the first step. I know that the NCAA is concerned that future litigation, future lawsuits could cripple it financially, and so they're now looking to Congress and the legislature to help them kind of carve out an exception to antitrust laws.
Yeah. So basically, obviously the entire gamut of how sports, the importance of sports in our society and the importance of sports in economics has changed so much from like just stuff people used to do after school to now the billions of dollars that are happening, that people are receiving. And if you can sort of follow the dominoes, it's the reason why college football is going towards this playoff, right? Because they lost a bunch of money last year with COVID. They're trying to make this up. That's why they're going from 4 teams to 12 teams. They're trying to get this done as soon as possible. One of my favorite sayings in life is when people say it ain't about the money, it's always about the freaking money. And so, you work in a profession and I work in a profession where a lot of things are money driven. So the other thing I think, and tell me if you agree or disagree on this, wrestling is not at the forefront of this conversation. This is really about football and basketball. And, wrestling is sort of, and all the other non-revenue sports are sort of just falling under the same umbrella. Is that a fair statement before we go any further?
I think that's the premise of where it affects college sports most directly. But it's going to create such a slippery slope for college athletes. So let's say that a college athlete needs a computer monitor, which is now a school supply, and so that can now be provided given the most recent ruling from the Supreme Court, because that's an educational related benefit. And what's to prevent the schools from spending $20,000 to put an entertainment system together with high definition screens?
Yeah. My computer monitor, is now an 85-inch big screen TV, right? Because I have that. Right. I mean,
right. I also play video games on and watch TikTok videos and communicate with other people, and so I mean that's going to be the interesting part to see. What is related, or what is deemed an education related expense and what isn't.
So we're recording this on Tuesday, June 29th at 3:50 p.m. Normally, I don't really care when we record, but this will come out on Friday, which will actually be July 2nd, I believe. So July 1st is the day. So literally, my phone just sent me an article. It said, in a major step, the NCAA Division I Council voted Monday, which is yesterday, to support an interim policy that would allow college athletes to profit off their name, image, and likeness, parentheses, NIL, without violating NCAA rules under federal legislation or new NCAA rules are adopted. The Division I Board of Directors will meet Wednesday to review and vote. In states that have passed these laws, athletes would be able to participate in NIL activities that are, quote, consistent with the laws. So looks like we lost your screen here, Jason, for a second. I don't know if can you still hear me?
I can.
Okay. All right, you're back. So let's go to the NIL thing. So right now there's 8 states, and most of the states are ones that don't have Division I wrestling, but shockingly have Division I basketball and football with really good teams there. Okay. So let me just simplify this, at least from the layman's point of view. Athletes can now get paid. They can get paid really for any reason. There's some obviously justifiable reasons, like if you've got 2 million TikTok followers or 1 million IG followers or whatever the case may be, you're an influencer. If you go talk about why, like if you're wearing a Van Heusen dress shirt right now and you've got 1 million people and you're like, I love this shirt, and people want to pay you to say that, then you're allowed to do that. My point of view on that is this. You and I are clearly over the age where we have any college eligibility left. If we would have people that would pay us for that, we would do it in a heartbeat. It seems kind of crazy to me that people that just because they have college eligibility shouldn't be allowed to do that. So I'm just asking you as a coach now or as a former athlete, not as a lawyer, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. I think, again, the NCAA is trying to create a level playing field still with recruiting, with boosters, financing money, with actually universities paying athletes. They don't want that stuff to happen. So they've kind of rolled over on this name, image, likeness. And it's going to be interesting to see where that level of compensation goes, because there's really no limits on it. So, you can have a Heisman Trophy winner that's now, signing autographs and doing things like that. Like you said, there's athletes that have been already putting together a pretty vast social media network following even before they're in college. And now they're able to make money off their Instagram followers, number of followers, and promoting other products. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that falls into them making money, but yet also how are they charting that so boosters aren't actually paying athletes, universities aren't paying athletes. It needs to be coming from a third-party revenue source.
So there's a lot to unpack there, what you just said. So first of all, I don't know if people know this, but in men's college basketball and in college football, the number of scholarships that are available and the number of athletes you can sign are the same. And what I mean by that is everybody gets a full ride. Okay, in football, there's 85 full rides, and you can only scholarship 85 kids. Where like in wrestling, there's 9.9, and you're supposed to put a roster together of like 35 kids. Okay, so on average, kids are getting 30%, give or take. You might be getting 80, and I might be getting 10 if you're a bigger recruit, but that's how it works. But if you think about football, and everybody can get a full ride, and they do have this cost of living adjustment, and my understanding is that the SEC schools like Alabama and those schools have the highest one. That's a difference. And if you also are a Pell Grant kid, you get to keep any of that. But there's a reason why these 4 or 5 schools that are always top 4 or 5 in recruiting keep getting the best kids. Now, part of it's hard work and recruiting, but if anybody thinks there isn't extra money going on right now, it's not it's a head in the sand point of view. This almost allows people to pay kids above board. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but the NIL ruling says that coaches and boosters cannot be directly responsible for helping athletes find sponsorships, marketing opportunities. Did I read that correctly?
That's correct, but they could have agents that are doing that for them. So now college athletes can have athletes for that specific NIL purpose. And you have somebody that's working for you to go out and find those opportunities. If you're, again, signing autographs, promoting a car dealership,
sure.
Whatever the revenue source is.
So you're the top quarterback in the country, okay? Or the number one recruit in the country in wrestling. I'm not going to say their name because I don't want to put them in a hypothetical and then people chop this quote out and say I did this, okay? But you're the number one quarterback in the country. I'm your buddy. I'm your roommate, whatever, okay? I'm the guy that carries your bags to practice. I carry your helmet for you. The coach or the boosters can tell me, hey, Joe Blow wants to give Jason $100,000 for a car dealership ad. And as long as they tell me and I tell you, that's legal, correct?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly about how the provisions of the channels of all that, of how that works. I mean, right now there are state laws that decide basically how the NLI works, and if the state laws aren't present, then the universities themselves figure out how that works. And so it's interesting. I was reading an article this morning. They were talking about North Carolina, for example. North Carolina doesn't have any state laws. So a state like that, are they going to follow suit with Florida and some of the other, New Mexico, Texas, some of the other states that have legislation on the books? Or are they going to come up with their own that could be advantageous to the athlete, more
liberal,
more advantageous to the athlete, and then that helps with recruiting, with maintaining players, etc.
Yeah. So you and I talked about this off air. In football, again, there's like 85 scholarships. So if you're the starting quarterback and the Heisman Trophy winner, and I'm the third string long snapper, we're on the same scholarship. Okay. Like,
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, we're both paying nothing. We both go to the same, dining table. We both just have a credit for when we go to the bookstore. We both don't get a bill when the tuition is paid for. We both don't have rent. We both don't pay utilities. We're both free. Okay. Now, for me, that's a bargain because I'm never going to step on an NFL field. I got my education paid for. I'm maybe part of Clemson or Alabama. I might get a national championship ring. That's going to open doors for me for the rest of my life. But if I don't make it, I might never actually step foot on the field. I might just be a practice squad guy. Where you're Trevor Lawrence, you're Devontae Smith, you're the Heisman Trophy winner. You're the guy that made a huge difference in whether or not this team won a national title or not. For us to have the same scholarship is unfair. You're worth more than me. So now that part's going to happen. I'm not torn on this because I've always thought people are giving kids money, and frankly, these kids deserve money. And a lot of really, if you really break it down, like basketball and football, the number of minority players are really percentage is very high, and the number of low income family kids are super high. Like this is their chance to change generations of wealth. If they spend their money properly, if they invest, if they buy property, if they buy investments, if they whatever, they can change their entire family's course for generations to come. And I'm pretty passionate about that. I mean, I hear my voice so I think this is something for people that are making $300,000 a year to shuffle paper to say you can't do this seems super hypocritical to me. I mean, it seems like, hey, we're going to keep the power as long as we can. And, I
think you're going to start, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but I think you're going to, I mean, with this Supreme Court decision, I think you may start to see civil rights lawsuits against the NCAA because, there is a disproportionate level of income for, African Americans across those sports like you had mentioned. And now if the NCAA is saying, well, now you can only get educational benefits, then again, they're curtailing their ability to produce wealth while they're in college. I think the interesting argument on the NCAA side, and as I think through this, is, if you have these athletes that are making millions of dollars, if they're able to do that on their name, image, and likeness, then do they need the educational part anymore? What is the need to go to school, to go to class, to have that
to maintain the sham.
Yeah. And if you look at, that's what you look at basketball and other sports where it's the one and done, and then they're moving on. You know, if with this name, image, and likeness, you know, I think that could open the floodgates, you know, in football as well, for example, where you don't see usually the one and done.
Yeah, like people hate this when I say this out loud because it makes certain people feel like sheep, but people root for the laundry. And what I mean by that is if you put Penn State against Iowa in either gym, 16,000 people are coming out. If you put the Penn State guys against the Iowa guys at the US Open and you said all 10 of these guys are going to hit, but they're wearing red and blue and it says USA, 1,600 people might show up. People root for the laundry. People root for their institution. You know, like you and I both live in Missouri. Ben Askren's not from Missouri, but everybody in Missouri, deservedly so, loves Ben Askren because he wore that Mizzou singlet and helped change that program. You know, and I mean, like that, he was a catalyst. You know, the two big catalysts in Mizzou's history are Ben and Jaden. You know, I mean, those are the guys, you know, Brian Smith can point at those guys and go, you can do anything here. You don't have to go anywhere else. So, you know, those, like, there's kids that grew up in different states, like Ben grew up in Wisconsin, you know, I mean, like, but, you know, like if Ben makes an Olympic team, Wisconsin's going to claim him, his high school's going to claim him, his junior high is going to claim him, Mizzou's going to claim him, and anybody who ever wrestled in a gym before are going to claim him. And that's, whereas when you get into this stuff now, these athletes, this is such a long time coming. This goes back to like Ed O'Bannon when he played for UCLA in basketball, and then they had like the NCAA basketball video game and his image was on it and he couldn't get paid. This is how a lot of this started. This, like, that guy's a trailblazer and a lot of people don't know that. You know, there's kids now, the AJ Ferraris, the RBYs, the Gable Stevensons of the world, who may not even have heard of Ed O'Bannon, and he's one of the reasons they're going to be able to make money.
For sure. For sure.
So when I look at this from a wrestling point of view, there, you know, Twitter's full of opinions, you know, and some of them are more valid than others. And somebody said, well, look, I don't know how much money these guys are really going to make because I don't know how much money is out there. Well, stop that thought. There's RTCs with $6 million in them. And, you know, there's people, if you ask those people at the RTC, would they rather have all 6 guys on the Olympic team or would they rather have their team win nationals every year? Most of those donors would say we'd rather win NCAA Division I's every year. So they're trying to figure out a way to use that RTC money to fund, to come up with ways to make the college team better. Now, USA Wrestling made a ruling several months back. I actually sat in on the meeting. I got really lucky where they said that the meeting that led to the ruling that said it used to be that RTCs could fund necessary expenses for athletes. So let's say you're Kyle Dake, okay? You graduated from Cornell, and that RTC can pay for your room and your housing. That they're allowed to do that. Well, that rule then transcended down to kids that are part of that RTC that were in college. Now, each university, their compliance department was, and I know this, was tasked with how do we interpret that? So if school A says, sure, you can do that. Well, now if you raise the money, if room and board's $10,000 a year, that $10,000 a year doesn't come out of your 9.9. I mean, you got to go raise the money, but now scholarship money goes a lot further. And if the school down the street says we don't interpret it that way, that's a huge recruiting advantage. Now, USA Wrestling said you can't do that anymore, but somebody has to report them. If School X is still doing that, somebody has to report them, and then they have to document it, and then they have to prove it. And then there's other things where like schools are hiring people's moms and dads to run stuff. And then I know that. People have told me this. I've looked it up. You can look it up. There's people's moms and dads that are running RTCs, they're running booster clubs, and that's how they're helping kids pay for education. That's how they're stretching 9.9. So let's just get away from the premise that there's not money out there. Okay, there's money, and there's always going to be money, and people are always going to want to see their school win. Like that's a given. You and I got a good buddy of ours, Chris Forbes, right, in Oklahoma, and he runs a roofing company. And I told him this. I said, a company could call you or a booster could call you and say, we want to give you $55,000 to do a roof. And it's a $5,000 job. Now, if they want to overpay, right? Like, I don't know what you charge per hour, but if somebody wanted to pay you $10,000 an hour, you'd probably take it, right?
Sure.
Okay. So if they want to pay Chris $55,000 and then say, but we want you to spend 50,000 of that to hire David Mirikitani for an ad because he's a high school senior or he's a freshman here, and we want him to come to XYZ University, they can do that. Like, because how no one's going to know, and tax-wise, it doesn't change anything. Chris receives 55, he pays 50 out. The 5 is what the job cost. I mean, like, there's a million ways that people can do this stuff now. It's basically just going to make it legal for people to give kids money, which is what's been going on anyway. I mean, I think this is the end of the beginning of the end of the NCAA, though. I mean, I do think that. And I also think this, and I'm really curious what you think about this, because you've sent a ton of kids to college at all different levels. I think that this is the end of a kid being a multiple-time All-American or national champion at a small school. Like, I think if a kid punches through from like Sacred Heart and somehow wins the nationals, that dude ain't staying, because his name, image, likeness at all these other schools would be so much more. I mean, it's an opinion, but I'm curious what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. You look at the small town like Stillwater, Oklahoma, compared to New York City, for example. Can the athlete that goes to Stillwater generate more money being in Stillwater versus the athlete that's going to Columbia University that has a much bigger, a bigger breadth? So I think that'll be interesting to see. Are they finding ways? Is the athlete finding ways? Are the agents finding ways that in those smaller areas that they're doing more and being paid more, or is it in the cities where there's more breadth?
Yeah, and I think that's a great analogy or example, because I think on the surface, right, like if you're not a wrestling fan, you go, well, you can certainly make more money in New York City than Stillwater, right? Just population, number of millionaires, all that kind of stuff, right? But like when you started that analogy, I was in my head comparing Stillwater to St. Louis. I'm like, there's way more people that care about wrestling in Stillwater than there are in St. Louis. And St. Louis is a much bigger town. We're a city. Stillwater's a town. But the amount of people that care about wrestling and the level that they care about wrestling, I would say is a lot higher in Stillwater. So I think there's going to be huge opportunities, for kids are going to find their way, right? Like, I mean, and there's a bunch, like Mark Ostrander and I did our podcast earlier today, weighing in, and he was saying like he thought Gable Steveson could stay in college because he could make just as much money. I'm like, dude, there's no way he's making as much money as the WWE, but he probably could make a lot of money, right? Like, he's young, he's well-spoken, he's super athletic, photogenic kid, super athletic, has succeeded at every level, right? Age group world champion, NCAA champion. If he became the Olympic champion, he would have a ton of marketing opportunities. Now, the real thing is, does he really want to go back and wrestle in college when you've already won the Olympics? Like, I'm like, that'd be like, hey, you just won nationals, now go back and win your state title. I mean, I remember my sophomore year in high school, I was lucky enough to win state, and then I had to go wrestle in Little League state 3 weeks later. It was kind of like, don't screw that up. You just won the big one. But those kind of guys are gonna have so many opportunities. The guys with big social media followings, right? Like an RBY, who does a really good job of promoting himself. Ferrari, Dayton Fix, like, these kids at different schools, like Spencer Lee, right? Spencer Lee's a kid that my dad coaches, a kid that wants anything autographed by Spencer Lee,
Well, now you could just have Spencer Lee wrestling camps all summer. And he could just go around the country and he can get all the money from those camps.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, he can create his own system.
And before they had to pay the RTC, and then the RTC had to fund it to him, and there were workarounds. Now they can just do it. So there's something else that's interesting about, there's a bunch of things that are interesting about this, but one of the other things is the deals that universities have with companies. So Grant Turner is on the Weighing In podcast, and he represents Nike. Our podcast is sponsored by Nike. And Nike has deals with universities, just like Adidas does, and other companies. But basically, Nike and Adidas are the two big ones, right? And so, like, for example, Iowa is a Nike school. So I don't think Spencer Lee or anybody else is going to be able to start wearing Adidas shoes, singlets, warm-ups during competition. I'm pretty sure that these contracts are going to supersede that. And let's say that I'm right, then that limits how much money they can make off of that. If I'm wrong, then those deals are going to get broken because Nike's paying to outfit all these guys, not like on a person by person basis. They're paying to outfit everyone at the University of Iowa in all the sports. And they're outfitting some kids that bring really no value to them. Like nobody's watching XYZ sport. I don't want to but like nobody's watching this. It's not on the Big Ten channel. The only people going are moms and dads, boyfriends and girlfriends. So if they break that, what'll happen is the Nikes of the world will instead of spending money on a blanket, they'll just spend money on the right kids. And then there'll be and then the programs will not make as much money. There's a bunch of fallout from this and how that's going to shake out. And from what you've read, does the contracts that these schools have with particular apparel companies, how do you see that playing out?
Yeah, I think you'll see a lot of athletes either developing their own brand or partnering with a brand that might not be the Nike, Adidas, Under Armour. I think that will be one avenue for athletes. And then the other will be, will Spencer Lee be able to wear an Adidas jacket when he's not on the mat? And, when he's doing his TikTok videos and when he's at his wrestling camps and things like that, is Spencer Lee's wrestling camps going to be sponsored by, somebody else other than Nike if Iowa is, still sponsoring the Hawks? So, how do those contracts come into play? Again, we're in new times. So, it's going to be interesting to see how this all develops and shakes out.
Yeah. And you bring up something in that scenario because like Hawkeye Wrestling Club is also a Nike club, right? So then like, how does that work? Like, because, they've got a deal with Nike, or like, let's use a non-Nike school. So like Arizona State is a tier 1 school with Adidas. Okay. But Sunkiss is with Rudis. Okay. So, but like, if you look at it, like Zahid Valencia has his own shoe deal with Terra Grappler. So Rudis makes wrestling shoes, but he's not wearing them. He's wearing this other shoe company. Okay. So, clearly on the club side, on the RTC side, that it seems like they can do what they want, right? Like that the deal that Rudis signed with Sunkiss Kids does not cover exclusivity on shoes. And like you said, maybe Zahid makes a TikTok video and he's wearing Reebok or he's wearing Puma, or somebody else that's not even in the wrestling game, but they have cool sweat jackets or something like that. And Puma thinks it's worth it to pay him. Now he's a different example because he's out of eligibility, but I mean, it would be the same thing. I mean, he was super popular when he was wrestling and killing people. I mean, he was on track to be a 3-time national champion, so, and had some of the most iconic finals with like the Mark Halls of the world. So it's really difficult and probably an unfair question, you, Jason, but if you pull out your crystal ball, where do you see this 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 2 years from now? How do you see this shaking out?
Well, again, I guess the first thing that is going to be interesting is what happens with the NCAA. Are they able to, are they going to go from a multi-billion-dollar industry and organization association to, being completely wiped out? That in and of itself is going to be interesting. The other thing that is going to be interesting is how much are these athletes going to actually be able to profit off of social media? I was looking at some stuff earlier today and was saying that, that some athletes are going to be able to make, between $10 and $20 per follower. Well, some of these
$10 or $20 per follower.
Yeah. And then on TikTok, it was like $3 to $4 per follower. YouTube, $4 to $7 per follower. Twitter was like $10 per $1,000 follower, but Instagram was like $20 per follower. And this was just an article that I read. So, some of those athletes are, generating, hundreds of thousands of followers and, you take somebody like that you mentioned with Gable Stevenson and you put, an Olympic title on him, those guys may be close to 1 million followers. And so, that's the part that I think that's going to be interesting is, where is the money source going to come from? Is it from their numbers of followers? Is it from the deals that they're going to do in the communities? Is it going to be on a national brand? Is it going to be through camps? These agents, that's another thing with these agents. We're hitting new territory now where everybody's going to want to be an NIL agent.
It's going to be the wild, wild west. And it'd be super interesting. You as a lawyer would be like, do you have to pass any tests? Do you have to be registered? Are there standard commission schedules? Or is it just, this is my buddy and I'm swinging deals and making whatever cuts I can make, right?
Well, yeah, we're talking about in 2 days, people calling athletes and say, hey, I got this opportunity for you.
Yeah,
I can make you I can make you millions of dollars. I can make you hundreds of thousands of dollars. And the athlete may not even know who that is that's calling them.
Yeah, your caller ID is going to be is going to be a massive feature, right? Like, screening and all that stuff. I was, just in case anybody was looking, I was looking on my phone, like how many followers Spencer Lee has and how many followers Gable Stevenson has just on Twitter. Okay. So like, I think Spencer Lee had between 35 and 40,000 and Gable Stevenson right at 30,000. So I have no idea how you quantify that. Right. But here's what's really interesting. Whoever came up with the $10 per TikTok or any of these things, that's an arbitrary number, right? Like if I just want to give you $100,000 because I want you to come to this school, and I'm a billionaire I inherited it or from owning business or oil or gas or whatever the hell I have my money from, I'm allowed to make a bad business decision, like they make bad business decision all the times on these coaches that they hire that end up stinking up the joint. Then they got to pay to fire them. There's buyouts on the way out. you know, like I said, it was an unfair question to ask that. I think this, if the NCAA does not keep the NCAA basketball tournament, they're dead in the water. It's the beginning of the end. That's where they make most of their money. That's why they were, like the first year when COVID hit, they got crushed because they spend all that money in advance. I mean, a lot of organizations do. Most people are like, oh, I got $100 coming, so I can spend it. I can spend 80 of it now, and then the $100 doesn't come. And they got to figure out how to cover the 80 they already spent. So, I don't know if we got another hour in this. I mean, maybe we have you jump on the pod next week with GT and Mark and I and just do like a 4-way, because I think that might be good, because you could jump in with us, all those guys. And from a legal point, I think you'd certainly add value. I'm super interested to see how this is going to work out. I think that's like the obvious statement, right? Like, and like I was ranked nationally coming out of high school. I was like ranked number 4 in America. Like that'd have been cool. Like I'd have made some money, like I'd have made something. I mean, I was pretty entrepreneurial. I'd have probably figured it out, how you get somebody to sponsor you. And, the stuff now is like kids are just happy to get like free shoes and stuff like that. Like those days are gone, man. I think the other thing is this: parenting is going to become a lot harder because, like, I was talking about a scenario, like you have a son who's a very good wrestler, right? If your son started making $250,000 a year, it'd be very difficult to tell him what time curfew is, because you're like, I got my own money, man. I'll get my own place, like,
doing TikTok videos or something like that, dancing and yeah, exactly. I mean, it's what's going to be really interesting is, before the athlete really needed the university.
Yes.
And when the athlete starts making, movie star type money, and not everyone will, but there's some that are going to make more money than they ever thought they could make, how important is the university to them at that point? Who's driving the bus?
No, that's why I used your son, because your son could not be a nicer or more respectful kid. Like I always say, he's like one of the few kids that ever came to my event and said, thank you, coach, and I appreciate this, and this has been awesome, and I didn't see you say, go tell him that. Like he just did that on his own. So I'm using him as a ridiculous example because I don't think he would go do something like that. But if somebody stuck $250,000 in his pocket, he'd be a little more difficult to discipline, because like part of the discipline that parents have over children is you need me economically, financially. And if they don't need you, the game changes. There's going to be kids making more money than their parents, like quickly, like super quickly. And I mean, at younger and younger ages, like we got like 2 minutes left, but like I was listening to an ESPN podcast and they were talking about a female hurdler at Kentucky who's got 400,000 social media followers. And this, by the way, this is great. Like women's athletes are probably going to explode and they're going to get more money, which is freaking fantastic. And I hope it happens for women's wrestling too, because that's a way for wrestling to be out of the Title IX garbage that happened and to grow our sport and become an NCAA sport and all these other things that people see. Hey, women are promoting products. People are buying stuff because of women's wrestling. I don't even know if I can finish my thought because we literally have like a minute left. So I don't even know if I'm going to try. So I think what I'm going to do is say publicly, I appreciate you coming on. Biggest compliment I can give you, and I give it to you privately, is you make what's important to me important to you in terms of raising money for veterans and for kids that to join wrestling. I love what you do with your kids and your wrestling club. And I appreciate your friendship and everything you do to support what I'm doing.
Yeah, exciting times, David. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, I think we're going to figure out a way to either do another one of these or probably just get you on with GT and Mark next week, because I just think there's a lot more to cover. But I want to thank everybody for watching, listening, and sharing. Again, these were my opinions and Jason's, not those of USA Wrestling or Nike or anybody else. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening, and we'll speak to you all next week.